Hey, it's Mark from Lamb of God, and you're watching Heavy Consequence.
First of all, congratulations. Consequences naming Lamb of God the heavy band of the year for 2022.
Thank you, Consequence. Quite the honor. It's been quite a year for us. So to have that acknowledged and validated by you all is special. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and the reason being is I think it's a combination of you guys going out there and hitting the road on a couple of massive tours and also putting out another great album. And I wanted to talk about the live aspect first. Uh, I saw you guys open up your fall tour in Coney Island, Brooklyn, a couple of months ago, and I got to say I've seen you guys throughout the years, but I'm just blown away by your latest performances. I also saw you again at Louder Than Life in Louisville shortly thereafter, and just both times, just incredible performances. The stage setup is incredible now. The pyro, and it just seems like the whole band is on top of its game. And I wanted to know, like, can you talk about your evolution as a live act over the past quarter century, and how important it is for you to put out like the best show possible for your fans?
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate the question. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, to start with the points you made, we really did pretty much since everybody shut down touring for the pandemic, and we were pretty early out of the gates when things started opening back up. And from that point to now, we very, very deliberately, very consciously focused on putting on the best show we could do. It's not that we focused on not doing that before. I think we just kind of we really prioritized the production aspect of what we're doing, the visuals. I think too, just interpersonally, and I've talked about this before, but interpersonally and individually, we find ourselves in very healthy places, in very we're having a lot of fun playing together, and I think that translates on stage. Um, so really the combination of putting more resources, putting more creative input, putting more money into frankly into our production and into the what the audience sees on stage, combined with just where we are as a band and how we're getting along, and the just the fun we're having on stage. We don't Years ago we would play to a click track, so everything was very structured. We are not on a click anymore. We have not been for a long time. So that really takes us off of a leash and allows us to push and pull and to stretch things out, to take as much time we want in between songs, to kind of jam things out, riff around a little bit more. So everything is, I'm not going to say is entirely spontaneous, because there is a set list and there is, we have a time frame every night, but we do stretch out and we do play around within the lanes of that time frame. And we play together, not at the same time. You know what I mean? So when you see Lamb of God on Thursday night, you're gonna get a different show than if you see us on Saturday night, and that's kind of the fun of it. And so yeah, we're having fun with all of that.
And you're also on great bills. I mean, in the spring you co-headlined with Megadeth, and then in the fall you headlined yourselves, but also brought out a really cool lineup. The night I saw you, it was Killswitch, it was Baroness, and Suicide Silence. And I spoke to both Suicide Silence and Baroness after that tour, and they both expressed what an honor it was to open for Lamb of God. Do you get that sense that, like, you guys been around the kind of even though you're on top of your game, are like these elder statesmen now, and have other metal bands looking up to you?
Well, it was an honor to have all those bands, and I appreciate them saying that. And it's nice to hear that they felt welcome, and they felt engaged with the tour. That again was the strategy, was to bring out um, nobody sets out to bring out a bunch of mediocre bands. We wanted to bring out the best bands we could. But I think maybe we were, because of we were mixing it up so that with in terms of the opening acts. Different parts of the country were different bands, so it made the whole thing feel like it had a different energy about it. We didn't know exactly how that would be received, because it's not necessarily a super common thing to do, is to switch up the bill as much as we did, but we thought it would be cool and something different, and it turns out it really was. Elder Statesman, yeah. I'm just glad to be here, man. I'm glad to be here on at every level. I'm glad to be in a band with my best friends. Glad to still feel like we're creative with what we're doing, and musically relevant within the genre. So grateful for all the love and respect we've gotten from the fans and from the other bands in our genre. So fortunate to feel like we are in a position to at times provide some leadership for these tours, and for what the possibilities are for extreme bands, because I do think when we all sort of broke in the early 2000s, it seemed impossible that bands like us were getting that kind of national attention and that kind of exposure. And so now, fast forward, 2 decades later, some of the looks we're getting and some of the positions we find ourselves in seem impossible. So I love that the movement, the genre, gets to push boundaries on what we're available to do, what opportunities we have. And anytime Lamb of God gets the opportunity to provide leadership in terms of that spectrum of things, I'm really grateful and feel honored to be a part of it.
And I wanted to ask about Randy as a frontman. He's, I think he's one of the most dynamic frontmen in metal, both on stage and also very charismatic off stage. Can you talk about what it's been like, playing in a band with him over these years, and then also his evolution as a frontman throughout the course of Lamb of God?
Well, it's just been awesome to have front row seats to watch Randy, my friend Randy, evolve into one of the greatest frontmen in metal. And I stand by that statement. He's anyone that's seen Lamb of God knows how great Randy is on stage, and he leaves it all up there, and it matters to him, and he cares, and he's just phenomenal to watch, and we're lucky to have him. He's also a real team player when it comes to being in a band with him. Um, Randy's the loudest guy in the room, and he's abrasive, and he barks a lot and talks over you and that kind of thing. And that's who you want as a front man. And I say all this with love. Randy's, my brother. He's one of my best friends in the world. Everybody knows that. So, but that's what you want as a front man, and that's why he's able to project and be that guy in front of 1,000, 10,000, or 100,000 people. Like, he can do that. So, but there is I'll share a story with you.
Sure.
When tying back to how we were talking about upping the ante and really increasing the priority of production. One of the things we've done over the last couple of years is we put follow spots on Randy. So when he's being a tornado all over the stage, there's at least one, usually two spotlights from the back of the arena or the amphitheater or whatever, following him around, so he's well lit, so you can see where he's going, because he's always going somewhere. Well, when we were implementing that part of the production, Randy was really, really nervous about that, really apprehensive, very averse to the idea of having spotlights on him, because in his words were, "This is not the Randy Bly band. I don't want to look like I'm the star of the show up there." And I was like, "Randy, we need you to be a rock star right now. This is you, this is your, you know what I mean?" And he understood that, and he's a team player, but he's also, and part of that is his own humility. So I don't know if Randy will love that I told that story or not, but ultimately, we put spotlights on him, and he looks great, and he's the front man of the band, and that's what we need, and that's part of that production. You see, that's why it looks so massive and exciting, is little things like that start to add up. But Randy was like uncomfortable with that, because he feels like he's in a band, and he's not, I think his words were, "I don't want to look like Liza Minnelli up there." And I was like, I promise, and it was a dialogue, but my input was, I promise you, you're not gonna look like that. It's gonna look great.
Yeah, I don't know
And,
if
and it does.
yeah, I don't think Randy will ever get confused for Liza Minnelli, but
No, probably not.
yeah, probably not. And I interviewed Randy before that at backstage at that Coney Island show in Brooklyn, and he talked about how we were talking about Omens, the album, and how, if not for the pandemic, you'd likely, even at that time, still be touring behind that self-titled album in 2020 self-titled album, at least for a couple of years. And that's what the pandemic, being forced off the road is what kind of drove you back to the studio. But I gotta say, two albums in a matter of 2.5 years, maybe two of your better albums in your discography. Like, you guys are really on top of games, really strong songwriting. And do you feel like that you're putting out some of your best music with your last couple of albums?
I do. I mean, you're hard pressed to find someone to say like, well, our new stuff is kind of uninspired. But our gold stuff is great, So no, I feel super motivated and super inspired about it. But I think, coming from self-titled to Omens, Willie and I being the ones who kind of really start the songwriting and sort of the catalyst for all the songs, because they all start really with guitar stuff. So Willie and I were very, very, very in tune with the fact that this cannot be self-titled part two. Let's not do that. There's nothing on the album that was even left like an idea for self-titled. It's all fresh stuff. And not only is it fresh stuff, but it's stuff that we, really tried to steer into a different lane from the album we had put out a couple years before. And part of that, ensuring that, was the way we recorded it. We made sure to record things. The process of recording was very different. The process of actually writing wasn't that different. Other than we, were really focused to try and make sure we were sort of stretching out and trying new things that we hadn't done on the last album. But the process of recording was dramatically different because we recorded the basic tracks live, which we've talked about a lot. But that was all part of this strategy to make sure we're stretching out and we're using a different color palette, so to speak, for the most recent record.
And getting back to touring, it's still a difficult time for bands. You guys made an interesting decision when you were on tour with Megadeth, when Randy caught COVID. Instead of jumping off the tour for a few dates, you recruited some guest singers from other bands. I spoke to Randy about it. He said, a lot of it comes down to financial reason. You don't play the show, you lose a ton of money. But was there any hesitation in putting out another singer in front of fans we talked about how dynamic Randy is and how beloved he is.
Yeah.
How did that thought process go? Like, when you said, look, we're going to throw out these guest singers for Randy for these few shows.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it was not ideal. It was not something we were thrilled about doing. There is a financial consideration. Certainly we have a lot of employees out there. We got multiple buses and trucks and employees and people working that, the overhead is extremely expensive on these tours. But really for me, what it boiled down to was, the business model of it, whereby the shows that Randy didn't play, every single ticket holder had the opportunity to get a refund in advance. So to me, it's either, it was a kind of a no-brainer, because you put on a show, but if someone's disappointed and doesn't want to do it, then they can not go and get their money back. So there's really, it's either you go to show and see a really unique version of us that you won't get to see again, or you can just get your money back. So it's not that offensive to me. It's not ideal. I remember being on tour with Black Sabbath, and this is a legendary show that people still talk about, and you may have been there too, but in Philadelphia, or in Camden, I think it was, and Ozzy was sick, and it was 2004 Ozfest, and Black Sabbath was doing all original members on the tour, and Rob Halford, they played the show, and Rob Halford did a set with Black Sabbath. Is that ideal? Probably not, but it's one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
Yeah, people are still talking about that show.
And I'm still talking about it 18 years later, because I came and we were playing second stage on that tour, and I watched Sabbath every night on that tour. but I came and sat my butt in a seat at the amphitheater. I rolled down, I had my pass, and I came right through security, and I sat my butt down in an empty seat and watched that show because I knew I was seeing something that I wasn't ever really going to get the chance to see again. So, I'm not saying what we did was on that level. We're not Black Sabbath, and with all due respect, uh, Mark and Joe aren't Rob Halford, but the guys that filled in for us. But it was still something cool, and the fans had the opportunity to get their money back. So I just
Yeah.
think it was the right thing to do, and we were extremely excited when Randy was feeling well and feeling like it was time to come back, and it wasn't too long before he was.
And I wanted to ask you about Pantera, because I think there's no denying that Pantera had an influence on Lamb of God.
No denying, no
No
denying.
denying. Obviously in kind of the groove metal, and they're back in the news these days. They're going back out on tour. I think I was a little surprising shot with Zach Wild and Charlie Benante joining Rex and Phil. And I wanted to get not only your thoughts on that, but while speaking on that, can you talk about, what they meant to you, what Dimebag meant to you as a young musician, getting into the business and starting to make music?
Yeah, I mean, Dime was a massive influence. So was Zach. Both those guys really, they those guys kind of bridged the gap for me between my love for old ZZ Top and even Led Zeppelin and Sabbath and very kind of blues influenced classic, heavy classic rock, which is really kind of where my soul is sort of as a guitar player. But those guys took bridge the gap between the Megadeth and the Metallica and the Slayer that I loved so much, just as a fan, and they sort of met those two worlds in the middle for me. So it was real heavy and very riff oriented and very modern at the time sounding to me as a young up and coming player, but rooted in that classic rock kind of history that I was already very much tapped into. So Zach and Dime, both massive for me. And Pantera really, I think, defined groove metal, certainly in the modern sense. And that is, that's what Lamb of God does. So I don't, when I hear the Pantera comparisons, I understand it because it's groove metal, and I understand it because I think there's a sort of there's an aesthetic that is similar. It's kind of the sort of rowdy metal band from, you know, more of a, the kind of southerny kind of vibe thing. So yeah, I mean, I love Pantera. I don't even remember what we're talking about. We're talking about how great Pantera is. Pantera's great. Zach and Dime, big influences, man, for sure.
Yeah, and the other
Fortunately, I got to spend time with both those guys. And I really cherish that experience.
the big thing that was recently announced was the Headbangers Boat, your own Lamagon's own headlining cruise, which is really cool, and an insane lineup. Mastodon, Guar, so many other cool bands. Can you talk about that? Just kind of headlining your own boat and how involved you guys were in curating the lineup. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, very evolved. And I mean, the lineup was everything, right? Because it's our name on it. So it's different than just hopping on a pre-branded cruise and just being like, hey, pay us this and we'll do the thing. It's our thing. So it mattered more. And sorry. So yeah, we were extremely involved in putting the bill together, and obviously we did a really good job because it's sold out in I think 6 days, less than a week. It's sold out, which it's pretty unbelievable. I was confident that it would do well. It sold out really really quick, so that was nice to to see people respond to it that positively and that quickly. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We've done a couple of these things before. Never have they been our own. So that'll be a little extra fun. And we're really proud of the bill. And I think the people that were jumped on it so fast are going to have a great time.
Is there anything different that goes into playing a show on a boat than
It's actually, yeah, it's a little different. There's less production. You just can't load all this crazy stuff onto a boat. But you're on a boat, so that in itself is sort of its own production, because you're depending on when you're playing and what's going on. You're playing like this.